Welcome to the Tim Booker Book Sharing Channel. Here, we delve into the endless world of words, savor captivating stories, and share insights and reflections. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Let's embark on this reading journey, experience the allure of words, and explore the ocean of knowledge together.
The book I'm interpreting for you today is a new release from November 2023. It's titled, Same as Ever, A Guide to What Never Changes. The author of this book might not be unfamiliar to you. His name is Morgan Housel, the same individual who authored the immensely popular book, The Psychology of Money, earlier this year. The Psychology of Money has been translated into 53 languages, selling over 3 million copies worldwide. It stands as the best-selling investment and financial book in the past 5 years. Hence, it's no surprise that his new book garnered immediate attention upon its release. Housel was previously a financial columnist for the Wall Street Journal. His distinctive trait lies in uncovering enduring patterns in the vast tapestry of historical data, then using these patterns to shed light on their significance for contemporary individuals. His previous book, The Psychology of Money, subtitled The Eternal Truths of Wealth, Human Nature, and Happiness, would fittingly describe this new work, Same as Ever. Reading Housel's works tends to evoke a peculiar sensation. Some truths you might have encountered long ago suddenly gain a fresh perspective through unexpected historical data and stories he presents. It's almost as if he possesses a certain inexplicable magic. Upon finishing this book, I felt it's a repository of bad news. Housel highlights the seemingly inevitable and unchangeable truths within the human world, all tinted with a sense of resignation. It's as if he aims to douse us with a bucket of cold water to help clear our vision anew. So, are you ready to hear some of these bad news? Part 1. Let's start with the first piece of bad news: you simply can't predict the future. People often like to say, if you want to know where we're headed, you must first understand where we've been. It's akin to the ancient Chinese saying, use history as a mirror to understand the rise and fall of events. So, the author, Housel, spends a lot of time delving into history. However, after diving deep, he finds that this saying doesn't quite hold true. The more realistic scenario is this: if you know where we've been, you'll realize that we don't know where we're headed. Why? Well, our world is rife with the butterfly effect. Tiny changes in circumstances can rewrite history. Take, for instance, over 100 years ago in May 1915, the RMS Lusitania, a passenger liner between Britain and America, was struck by a torpedo from a German submarine, resulting in nearly 1,200 deaths. It's commonly believed this incident was a catalyst for America joining World War I. However, few know that if the ship's captain, Turner, hadn't shut down the fourth boiler room on board, the ship could have sailed faster, saving a day's time and possibly avoiding the encounter with the German submarine. This could have altered the course of World War I significantly. Similarly, going back over 200 years to the night of August 28, 1776, had the wind blowing towards the British fleet been favorable instead of against them, they might have overwhelmed George Washington's army, and the United States might never have existed. You'll notice behind every major historical event lies a series of chance occurrences and coincidences, things you simply can't predict using logic. Furthermore, when humans make predictions, there's a tendency to subconsciously assume other variables remain constant while contemplating how one thing might change. But the real world doesn't operate with controlled variables, everything is interconnected. For instance, some individuals might fancy a particular stock but hesitate to invest when it's priced at $200. They watch it soar to $600 and regret not buying earlier, thinking, if it drops back to $200, I'll surely buy. However, when it actually drops to $200 again, can they predict if it'll surge back up? They're uncertain because many in the market believe its current value remains overestimated, and the government's policies concerning that industry aren't clear. Many factors change, making prediction impossible. Additionally, the book discusses a phrase, calm sows the seeds of madness. For example, it mentions Minsky's well-known financial instability hypothesis. Housel sees it as describing a psychological process, summarizing it in 3 sentences. When the economy is stable, people become optimistic. When people become optimistic, they accumulate debt. When they accumulate debt, the economy becomes unstable. Therefore, Minsky fundamentally suggests that stability itself breeds instability, prosperity itself carries the seeds of recession. A previously discussed book, The Inescapable Economic Cycle, emphasizes this viewpoint. The tricky part is, it's hard to pinpoint where that turning point lies, making it difficult to predict the future. There's another line in the book worth pondering: risk is what you don't see. Or as a financial advisor puts it, risk is what remains after you've thought of everything. In history, the most significant risks and events often catch people off guard. If someone anticipates them, preparations are made, diluting their destructive potential, no longer seen as risks. Therefore, Housel contends, the biggest risks, the most crucial news stories of the next decade, are things nobody discusses today. That's an everlasting truth. No matter which year you read this book, this fact remains unchanged. So, summing up what we've covered from various chapters in this book, it ultimately aims to convey one thing: the initial bad news, you just can't predict the future. The past was, and the future will be the same. Now, facing an unpredictable future, what should we do? Housel's advice is simple: make fewer predictions, make more preparations. The rationale is straightforward: since predictions are unreliable and unpredictable, let's not heavily rely on them. Nassim Taleb, author of The Black Swan, echoed similar sentiments: invest less in predictions, invest more in preparation. Moreover, in making more preparations, the more refers to going beyond what you believe is adequate preparation. Because typically, we prepare for risks we can imagine. However, as mentioned earlier, genuine risks are those unseen ones, so you need an extra margin. For instance, in personal finance, Housel suggests the right amount of savings should exceed your planned amount. When you start feeling it might be excessive, that's the suitable level. Conversely, concerning debt, it should be reduced from what you consider an acceptable level. Additionally, when doing financial planning, if you expect an 8% annual investment return, should your plans solely hinge on this figure? Not quite. A better approach is to plan with a discount, ensuring your plans hold even with a 4% to 5% return. It's a similar principle. Apart from make fewer predictions, make more preparations, Housel offers another piece of advice: the first rule of happiness is low expectations. He emphasizes this throughout an entire chapter. He points out a phenomenon: if you were to ask an American today about the country's golden age, most would cite the 1950s, nostalgically reminiscing about that era. Back then, an average income man could provide a comfortable life for a family of 5. Many Americans today believe life in that period was happier than now. However, data tells a different story. In reality, the living standards of American families in the 1950s were much lower than today's. Adjusted for inflation, the median household income in the 50s was less than half of today's, home ownership rates were 12 percentage points lower, the average housing was 1/3 the size of today's, and workplace fatalities were 3 times higher. Is that truly the era people long for? It doesn't seem that great. So, why do people from that time appear happier? Housel discovered the key lies in the narrower wealth gap back then. Historians note that, proportionally, the most significant economic gains back then were directed towards the lowest income members of society, significantly reducing the wealth gap. Consequently, this created an era where your social circle had similar lifestyles, making it easier to control your expectations. Hence, low wages, small houses, wearing old clothes, it was all fine because everyone around you lived similarly. However, today, on social media, we see everyone else's fantastic lives, their luxury items, mansions, RVs, yachts, leading us to feel dissatisfied when we don't have the same. Hence, the book presents a thought: today's economy excels in creating 3 things: wealth, the ability to flaunt wealth, and envy towards others' wealth. We previously discussed in The Economics of Happiness how economists found that people's perception of income is more about social comparisons. Therefore, if everyone's income is growing, individual and collective happiness doesn't noticeably increase. Same as ever takes it a step further: if the rate at which people's expectations expand surpasses the rate of economic growth, even as society's wealth increases, people's happiness might decline. It's akin to the stock market: good news might result in negative feedback if it doesn't meet people's high expectations. Similarly, in the workplace, even if you're striving, if your progress lags behind your boss's expectations, your impression might decline. So, expectations, while easily overlooked, fundamentally influences how we value everything in life. From a personal happiness perspective, this insight offers a lesson. If you want a happier life, managing your expectations is crucial. Once, someone asked Charlie Munger, "You seem very happy and content. What's your secret?" Munger's response echoed what we discussed earlier: the primary rule for a happy life is low expectations. He added, if you have unrealistic expectations, your life will be miserable. Have reasonable expectations and accept life's outcomes, good or bad. Learn to endure. Therefore, facing an unpredictable future, Housel reminds us to remember an equation: happiness equals what you have divided by what you expect. When we anxiously predict the future, what we're mainly concerned about is how our possessions might change. However, many overlook another element: our expectations. Yet, this is something we can control. Hence, instead of fretting, it's often better to lower expectations. Not getting something becomes normal, getting it becomes a pleasant surprise. Having this mindset could make life much happier. So, just as we said earlier, this book reveals the first eternal truth: you can't predict the future and what we should do about it. Part 2. Let's dive into the second piece of bad news: you simply can't take shortcuts. What defines a shortcut? It boasts two characteristics: it makes your journey easier and faster. However, Housel strikes a big red cross against both these notions. In a chapter titled, "It's Supposed to Be Hard," this book conveys that anything worth pursuing in this world comes hand in hand with pain. Embracing and acknowledging this truth prevents us from constantly seeking escape routes and shortcuts. Housel mentions an instance when they invited a social media consultant to share insights on making their content go viral. The consultant spent 3 hours detailing various tactics, using trending hashtags, enhancing interaction, identifying peak posting hours, and so forth. However, Housel sensed something amiss. The consultant never addressed the most crucial aspect: the need to create genuinely compelling content that people want to read. Presently, many in the market teach courses on how to become educators or influencers. They create an illusion that following their techniques guarantees success for anyone. Yet, they overlook the critical element: you need genuinely valuable content, something people genuinely need. And that's the most challenging part. Housel emphasizes that humans are often drawn to hacking techniques, cheat codes, and shortcuts because they promise to bypass pain and effort. However, in the real world, such tools scarcely exist. This echoes a quote from Munger: "The safest way to get what you want is to deserve what you want." This remains an eternal truth. The book references the 90s sitcom Seinfeld, where the lead actor and writer, Seinfeld, once complained that despite being provided with a team of writers, they didn't contribute many good jokes. A friend responded, "Wouldn't it be strange if they churned out great jokes every single day?" Seinfeld realized the essence behind "supposed to be hard." It's because it's difficult that their show soared, offering something irreplaceable to the audience. He even rejected the proposal of hiring a consulting firm like McKinsey to streamline their writing process. He remarked, "The success of this show came from micromanaging. Every word, every line, every shoot, every edit, every casting choice had meticulous attention. If your efficiency is high, then your method is wrong. The right method is the difficult method." While these words pertain to the nature of the creative industry, Housel suggests that we should remember this while pursuing other goals. Essentially, anything worth pursuing comes with a cost and often involves pain. If at any point, something seems easy or highly efficient, it might be crucial to pause and ponder whether you're using the wrong method, a toxic shortcut. Continuing on the toxicity of shortcuts, the book mentions another aspect: speed. Housel shares a line directed at everyone expanding their careers: a good idea, if accelerated too quickly, can turn into a bad idea. The book cites Starbucks as an example. In 1994, it had around 400 stores. By 2007, its expansion rate surged to opening 2,500 stores annually, averaging a new store every 4 hours. Consequences followed: loose management, declining customer experience, and a 50% drop in same-store sales growth. They had to resort to massive store closures and layoffs. Starbucks founder Schultz reflected on this in his 2011 book, Onward, admitting, "When unbridled growth becomes a strategy, we lose direction." Taleb also mentions that as a group's size transitions from 4 to 100 to 100,000, the way they handle risks and responsibilities completely alters. Corporate culture also follows this trend. Management practices effective in a 10-person company could potentially dismantle a 1,000-person organization. Some companies that grew too quickly fell into this pitfall. The book also harkens back to Harvey Firestone, the tire magnate from 1926, stating, "A business that grows too fast is like a boy who makes money too fast. Even if he gains a lot, it's challenging to hold on to it." Even nature abides by this principle. Researchers once took two identical sets of small fish, one in cold water and the other in warm water. Those in cold water grew slower, while those in warm water grew faster. Astonishingly, when placed back into normal temperature water, a surprising revelation unfolded. The fish that grew slower initially had a lifespan 30% longer than average, while those that grew too fast and too easily had a lifespan 15% shorter. Biologists suggest that rapid growth damages bodily tissues. If you grow too quickly, all your body's resources go into supporting that growth, leaving little for repairing damaged tissues. Conversely, slowing down growth allows for more comprehensive healing. Therefore, circling back to the core statement of this section, you simply can't take shortcuts. Achieving substantial, sustainable growth requires time, and crafting genuinely valuable products or endeavors is arduous. This was true in the past, and it holds for the future. In Damn Right, Behind the Scenes with Berkshire Hathaway billionaire Charlie Munger, Buffett and Munger advocate for a saying, "Take the high road, there's less traffic." Why is there less traffic on the high road? They never explicitly mentioned. Yet, this book precisely tells us, because the high road, it's tough, it's slow. But is it worth it? Absolutely. One particular line from the book I'd like to leave you with is this: most beautiful things in life, from love to careers to investments, are derived from two things, patience and scarcity. Patience allows for growth, while scarcity allows us to appreciate the process of that growth. However, let's ponder, when people pursue great endeavors, what's the most common strategy they employ? Striving to make it grow faster, bigger, and more. Housel states that this has always been a problem, in the past, in the future, and it's perennial. Part 3. Here's the next revelation from the book, an unchanging truth. Unfortunately, it's another piece of bad news: you just can't adhere to long-termism. The phrase, "be a long-term thinker," sounds grand, as if we're standing at the beginning of a broad avenue, pointing to a garden of blossoms at the other end, saying, "That's where I want to go." But in this book, Holder says that's not the reality of long-term thinking at all. He offers a metaphor that struck me: we're not standing at the beginning of a broad avenue, we're standing at the foot of Mount Everest, pointing to its peak and saying, "That's where I want to go." Saying those words is only the beginning of the real test that follows. What are these challenges? Firstly, long-term is composed of numerous short terms. For instance, if you invest money with a 10-year plan, it means that in the next 10 years, every economic fluctuation, bear market, collapse, or even a boom will make your nerves tremble. You might obsess over whether to increase or decrease your investment or withdraw it altogether. Can you withstand this temptation? Many can't. It's almost like the common joke: the best way to stick to long-termism is to forget your account password. Of course, that's the most fundamental challenge we've discussed. In this book, I found a more valuable reminder: merely having a long-term belief isn't enough. Your partners, colleagues, spouse, and friends need to be enrolled in this journey. When you make a long-term decision, whether in corporate governance, family choices, or wealth management, it's not enough that you are committed to long-termism. You also need to consider whether your companions or family have reached a consensus, whether they can consistently support you. Moreover, during this long period, there might be situations where your companions or family might persuade or even force you to change your decision. For example, in your household, will the next 10 years involve childbirth, studying abroad for children, or moving houses, requiring the use of this money? These are essential considerations because your assessment of a decision might be based on long-term prospects. But if you're forced to withdraw midway, for any reason, it could yield a completely different outcome, rendering your initial judgment futile. This book delves into another intriguing point, the mockery of certain fund managers as short-term thinkers. However, many fund managers lack the conditions to adhere to long-termism because their clients are short-term oriented. At the first sign of short-term fluctuations, clients want to bail out, pushing fund managers into short-term thinking. It reminds me of a book I read previously, 5 Truths I Realized While Dining with Buffett. The author, a successful fund manager, mentioned an incident before the 2008 financial crisis. His father secretly invested a significant sum in Lehman Brothers bonds, yes, the same Lehman that eventually went bankrupt in the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. The fund manager had thoroughly reviewed Lehman's financials and knew it was doomed. So, when he received a call from his father informing him about the Lehman investment, he was utterly devastated. His breakdown wasn't just about losing a lot of money but also realizing the inadequate communication within his family. That shattered the fortress of wealth he was trying to build for his family. So, often, what leads to the failure or derailment of your plans might not be your execution or misjudgment but rather the unforeseen disruptions caused by stakeholders you initially overlooked. Therefore, before embarking on a journey of long-termism, it's crucial to consider all significant stakeholders, communicate with them, and reach consensus. However, if you don't want to struggle with communication or predict what might happen during this long period, there's another method: keep enough flexibility. When considering how much money to allocate for long-termism, factor in flexibility. Allocate a structure where a portion of the funds, say 60%, is absolutely untouched and won't be intervened with in the near future. Lock this portion. Reserve the remaining 40% as flexible reserves. This part follows the long-term plan, but in unforeseen circumstances, it's accessible without affecting the overall plan. That's leaving room for flexibility. Holder says, the more flexibility you have, the less you need to know about what comes next. In discussing the psychology of money, we covered why people need long-termism. An essential reason is to allow compound interest the space to display its power. We know that compound interest relies not on enormous returns but on long-term cumulative returns. Therefore, factors that enable you to stay in the game longer are what strengthen your advantage. In this book, Same as Ever, Holder also mentions, in any field, be it wealth, career, or relationships, only when you persevere for a sufficient duration can you enjoy long-term growth. How can you persist for a sufficient duration? He adds a fascinating mindset applicable to long-term thinkers: short-term pessimism, long-term optimism. The book recounts a story about an esteemed U.S. Navy admiral named Stockdale. During the Vietnam War, he was the highest-ranking U.S. officer held captive. He faced torture over 20 times and was imprisoned for 8 years. After Stockdale's release, in an interview, he was asked if prison life was utterly despairing. He replied, no, he never lost confidence, he always believed he'd be released and reunited with his family. It seems optimistic, right? Not entirely. When further asked who suffered the most in prison, he replied without hesitation, it was the optimists. Prisoners who frequently said, we'll definitely be home by Christmas, broke down when Christmas arrived, and they didn't leave. The most sustaining mindset is to firmly believe that things will get better while accepting the brutal reality that ahead might be a string of setbacks, disappointments, and shocks. That's short-term pessimism, long-term optimism. Applied to prisoners, it's believing things will eventually improve but knowing they won't be home by Christmas. In corporate governance, it's about climbing Mount Everest while acknowledging the possibility of freezing to death in the next pit. That's why Nvidia's motto is, we're less than 30 days from bankruptcy, and Bill Gates insists on keeping enough cash in the bank to run the company for an entire year without income. From a personal perspective, short-term pessimism, long-term optimism, in wealth management, is saving like a pessimist and investing like an optimist. Applied to more aspects of life, it's planning like a pessimist and dreaming like an optimist. Because only when you're pessimistic enough can you build reserves in the short term and maintain stability to keep going. And only by staying stable can you remain at the table and witness long-term optimism. So, circling back to our interpretation of this book today. I've shared a lot of bad news. You can't predict the future, you can't take shortcuts, you can't adhere to long-termism. In the short term, these might seem pessimistic. But could this pessimism lead you to more detailed consideration of the life wisdom hidden behind these bad news? Could this thought process become the walking stick to help you ascend Mount Everest? There's a saying we're all familiar with, Roman Rollins, the only heroism in the world is still to love life after knowing it as it is. Perhaps only by understanding the truth can we better love life. Maintaining optimism while accepting harsh realities will always remain one of the most critical skills in our lives. The above is the key content I wanted to share with you from the book, Same as Ever. I hope today's discussion will help you contemplate wealth, happiness, and life. Congratulations on finishing another book. Thank you all for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Let's combine wisdom and practice to achieve our financial goals and create a better future together. Thank you, goodbye.